I don't know if there are any other dudes out there like me who have recently got into reading fiction. If you're like me, you spent the majority of like your early adult life as a dude reading nonfiction self-development books, which candidly, when I started reading those types of books, I was in a season of my life where I needed to. But 6 years later, you can only read so much self-development content before it kind of just starts to feel a little bit repetitive. In February of 2026, I decided I was going to forego all things self-development. So I stopped listening to podcasts. I stopped reading self-development books. I stopped watching self-development YouTube videos. And YouTube, I live on YouTube. It was a big jump for me. So when I jumped into the fiction space, I was like, I don't know what my tastes are because this isn't my jam yet. I picked up my very first fiction book at Barnes & Noble called The Day the Street Stood Still. Right here. Holy crap. This book was not what I expected. And for the first time, I think in my life reading a book, I got the opportunity to kind of see the world through a completely different lens. Because obviously I've lived my entire life through this lens. And that was kind of like my first taste of like, wow. That one story taught me more about somebody else's perspective in life. This is the closest thing that I could get to there. And so that went on a long journey, over the last 6 months of me just like kind of diving headfirst into reading fiction books. And the first book I kind of just want to talk about is going to be Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. And I know that this is probably a super popular book. It actually is because I was looking at Goodreads and 790,000 ratings. That's I would say that's a pretty popular book. To be candid, like this is super new for me. So realistically, this video is gonna have spoilers. If that's cool with you, stay. If not, no big deal, I get it. I'm sure you've probably kind of heard the story, but I'm gonna give you kind of a 10,000 foot view of it. Follows a guy named Jason Dessen. He basically travels the multiverse after a different version of him, a multiversal version of him, kidnaps him from his current life and his kind of timeline universe and ships him back to that Jason Dessen's universe. So,
oh my God, spit it out, bro.
Jesus, sorry, I didn't mean to drop my phone. They switch places, and Jason and this girl Amanda basically go throughout these quote-unquote adventures, because they're not really adventures. It's actually probably very, very traumatic for him, but they basically have to kind of fight their way back through infinite versions of the world that all live on the same plane at the exact same moment. He needs to find the version of his life that is like the perfect cocktail of everything that's happened. And he has to do that basically trying to find a needle in an infinite haystack. And this book, although it's rated highly on Goodreads, I see people talk a little bit poorly about it. And I just want to give my thoughts on that. And specifically a review that stood out to me was a review from Daniel Green.
But in the pandemic world, before Amanda leaves him, they go to his home where it's, again, this isn't your wife, dude. I get you miss her, but this is an infected, dying version of your wife whose version of Jason already died of the plague. And Jason goes to see her and she's of course like fevered out, like, you're alive? I thought you were dead. Our son's dead upstairs. And Jason, she's like late infected, like bleeding from the eyes infected, and Jason just like gets in her face and he's like, oh my God, I better get real close.
Damn it, man, I'm a doctor, not a physicist.
Reading is extremely subjective, so there is no right answer. But just to kind of counter my thoughts off of that, because when I heard his review of it and the fact that he did not really like the book, it kind of pushed me to actually want to pick up the book, and I fell in love with it. I rated it a 5 out of 5 on Goodreads. And the reason I loved it so much, I think, is because of the season of life that I'm in. The core theme for Jason is the fact that he is fighting for his life to get back to his family. Like, that is his whole mission. And so something that I think a lot of people had issues with in the book was the fact that, like, Jason was making a lot of poor decisions as he was going, like, they got to this pandemic world, And I mean, when you're looking at the book from like an outside perspective, obviously, right? Like Jason he's distraught when he finds his wife in this pandemic world, like sick. And he wants nothing more than to like hold her and comfort her as she's like dying there on their doorstep. And people look at that scene and they're like, you know, Amanda was telling you to turn back and run back. But it's like, it's so tough. And this is, again, just my perspective, but it's so tough to like fully grasp probably what Jason Desmond was feeling in that moment, unless you kind of like have lived in that type of situation. And being somebody who is a father and a husband, and I love my family dearly, I don't find it hard to believe that like all Jason would want to do is make this version of his wife feel better. And people are like, well, it's not your wife. But it is. It's just, it's a multiversal version. Like, no, it's not your wife from like your specific point in the universe, but it is still I mean, it's I think the thing that the book did a great job of for me was when I put myself in Jason's shoes, I can't help but think of all I would want to do if I was in that situation was to make my wife feel better, was to make my wife feel comfortable, to make my wife feel like there was somebody there for her in a world where it's crumbling to the ground. And I think that that's a pretty consistent theme just kind of like across the book. And again, like if you haven't lived in that type of situation, I can understand where it would be tough to empathize with Jason in this book. But for me, this entire book, just from the moment he got kidnapped and got put into a different universe and then fought his way back to his family up until the end, there were a few quirky things where I was like the multiple things with the multiple Jasons, like when you first read it is kind of goofy, but then when you kind of think about it, it's like the chaos kind of makes it fun. And then the final decision of them deciding to like leave the universe. I'm sure there were other ways or better ways maybe for him to like work that situation out. But to be candid, the whole situation was kind of fucked in the first place. So you're kind of just making the best decision you can make in the moment. Again, like speaking candidly, this is my first sci-fi book. This is, well, my second actually, because I read Project Hail Mary before that. But one of my first sci-fi books, and definitely one of my first books by Blake Crouch. I've never read any of his other books. I actually haven't read that much fiction. This year, again, since I've only started reading since February, I've only read 15 fiction books. But I do love this book. I think if you're like me and you're constantly kind of on YouTube trying to find somebody with like similar tastes or somebody who lives in a similar situation as you, I hope that this video helps. I mean, you have the big YouTubers in the reading and book space, quite frankly, kind of all share the same opinions, or not the same opinions, but like they share the same books that kind of everyone is talking. But especially with like reading fiction, I mean, there's so many great fiction books out in the world. And for me, again, I just wanted to create a space for people with similar thought processes as me or similar life situations as me, where they're just looking for good books to read, but they're not looking for a YouTuber with like, who's like reading super critically. Because to be candid, I'm not the smartest person in the world. I mean, I would not consider myself a critical reader in really any sense of the word. I purely read for enjoyment. That's it. That's my first one. Blake Crouch's Dark Matter. Let me know if this is a book that you guys have read before. If you have, what are your thoughts on it? What do you think of like my take specifically? And if you disagree with it, like tell me what your thoughts are down in the comments, because again, I read this from the perspective of a father and as a husband, and so for me it resonated really well, but that might most definitely probably isn't the case for everybody. So let me know your thoughts down below, and if you enjoyed this video, let me know by leaving a like. I feel like everyone asks for you to like and subscribe. So how about this? Do what you want and let me know your thoughts. Peace out. Peace out.